Hi, my name is Robyn. I am a mother of three and a doctor. I'm also a three-time lymphoma survivor. It was so unusual. The first time I was diagnosed with lymphoma, I sort of diagnosed myself. I didn't have any symptoms, but I was watching TV, and for some reason I sort of felt in my neck, and I realized I had a lymph node that was above my collarbone. And as a doctor, I knew that was really bad. That's called a supraclavicular lymph node. And I knew immediately that this wasn't good. That's usually associated with breast cancer or lung cancer, or even ovarian cancer. I didn't even expect lymphoma. And so the next day when I went to work, I actually went to see a doctor, and they agreed. And the same day we did a CAT scan. And because I'm a radiologist, I looked at my own CAT scan and I saw all these lymph nodes in my neck, which you couldn't feel, but I knew I had lymphoma. It was so weird to look at the CT scan screen, because I looked at the images before they even were sent to the computer, and I saw all these lymph nodes. I even got back on the table and I had the technologist continue the scan all the way up, because initially we started at chest, abdomen, pelvis, and I saw these lymph nodes and I went, oh my God, I have lymphoma. And to be honest, I have a partner who specializes in head and neck, and I immediately called him and I sent him the images, and he's not the most empathetic person, and he just said, you have lymphoma. I said, yep, that's what I thought. And that's how it all started. I actually had another partner do a neck biopsy the next day, and I went to pathology. I looked at the slides with the pathologist, and he looked at me. He was very empathetic, actually, and he goes, well, there's a lot of B cells here. And I said, well, what about some Reed-Sternberg cells, which are associated with Hodgkins? He goes, yeah, I don't see any of those. And I sort of said, wow, so this is probably non-Hodgkins. And he said, yeah. And I actually looked at him. I said, is this treatable now? I don't even remember. And he looked at me and he said, yep, it's treatable. So I went home and walked around the block, told my husband, and we just cried a lot. And we did wait to tell our kids until I had a final diagnosis. I didn't want to tell my kids until I actually had the final diagnosis and I had a treatment plan. My kids were actually in middle school and high school. They were young. It was just going to be such a shock, and I just needed to be prepared to tell them what to expect. So I waited to tell them until I knew what my diagnosis was and I knew what our plan was. I remember the second and third time I was diagnosed, or I knew that I had lymphoma, before I had a scan, before I had anything. I was actually in remission for 4 years after the initial chemotherapy. And once again, I was walking around. I think I was looking at some flowers or something, and I realized, oh my God, I have another lymph node in my neck. And it's not supposed to be there. It was actually in my posterior neck, which is not where you have lymph nodes. And I just knew that I had lymphoma again. And it was just devastating. And I looked at my husband and I said, look, I think I have lymphoma again. He goes, no, you're being paranoid. And, so it turns out I was right, unfortunately. And that led to a bone marrow transplant. Well, first I had rice. I had intrathecal chemo, which is not fun, where they put chemotherapy in your spinal cord to treat lymphoma in your brain. Then I had a bone marrow transplant. And after that, I had head and neck radiation, and I was very, very sick. I couldn't eat solid food. It was, could only live on smoothies. But then I was in remission, and that was fine. But I was still very weak. And only 9 months later, I relapsed. I was on a vacation with my youngest son. And again, I felt a lymph node in my neck that hadn't been there before. And it wasn't painful. And I just knew it was lymphoma. So it was devastating. I didn't tell my kid that at that time, because I just couldn't break it to him. This is always hanging over you. Is this and lymphoma going to come back? And now I'm 8 years out of CAR T-cell therapy. Technically, I should be cured, but they don't really know. I just think you need to live life to the fullest. I take care of myself, but enjoy life every day. I try not to focus on it. And as far as dealing with it, early on, I'll be totally honest, I did talk to a therapist. I highly recommend getting therapy, because psychologically, this disease is almost as hard mentally as it is physically. And I don't think there's any negativity to seeking therapy and talking it through and being honest and taking time for yourself. These things are very, very important. The thing is now that it's so much better than when I was going through this. There's just so much hope. I remember when I was diagnosed a third time, I did not have a match for an allogeneic transplant, which was the only therapy that was offered that was approved. And I knew that I probably wouldn't survive that. So then I had CAR T-cell therapy in trial, and of course it's worked. Nowadays, patients in that same situation don't have to look at an allogeneic transplant, which is extremely difficult. We use that now as a last resort. Now we have bispecifics, we actually have other CAR Ts, and even other immunotherapy. And each year, something new is being approved. So the bottom line is there's hope. It is so much better than when I went through it, and I truly hope that no one else has to go through everything that I did. In clinical trials are sometimes the best medical therapy that we have to offer. For some reason, some people think that you're sort of a guinea pig or that you might be given a placebo. This does not happen in cancer clinical trials. You usually have one arm of the trial where you're beginning with standard therapy and another arm of the trial where you're giving even better therapy, or in my case, everyone got the treatment. So please consider clinical trials. Sometimes it's the best option, and if it works well, you can contribute and help others. I'm a great example of the fact that you need to be your own advocate. Even though I'm a doctor and my team was fantastic, I actually found my clinical trial and I knew that it was right for me. I got an opinion from that trial, which was 5 states away, and I chose it. Of course, I am unique, but I highly recommend this because I did this on my own, and I think everyone can be their own advocate. You can look on the internet, you can ask questions, and it's very important. And it's also important if you do a trial just to help other people, because if it's successful, you may save lives other than your own.